This is episode 3 of Baba Yaga's Magic. Who is a Lisovyk? This is Madame Pamita, and in today's episode of Baba Yaga's Magic, you are going to meet another Slavic spirit. You can call him the Lord of the Woods or the Master of the Forest. You can call him Chuheister or the Kind One. But who is he? He's the Lisovyk. The Lisovyk is a forest spirit who can pass magical gifts onto you or trick you by leading you deeper and deeper into the woods where you will get lost. So I want to share with you how to get more of the former and less of the latter. And in this episode, I'll be sharing the myths, the legends, and the lore of the Lisovyk and tell you how you can get to know him, honor him, and maybe even meet this gentle giant of the woods. Before we get into that, though, I have something I'd like to share. As you know, when we're recording this podcast, it's a few weeks before it goes out and gets published. But we just had the invasion. Russia just invaded Ukraine. And so I am promoting a campaign for the Ukraine Crisis Relief Fund. Global Giving is a great organization, and they have a Ukraine Crisis Relief Fund. Russia has invaded Ukraine in the biggest state against state attack since World War II. Millions of civilians are caught in the middle of an escalating military conflict and humanitarian crisis, and casualties are rising. Your donation to this fund will support Ukrainians in need with a focus on the most vulnerable, including children. There's been 8 years of armed conflict in eastern Ukraine, and it has already killed thousands of civilians and put millions of need of humanitarian assistance. Full-scale war in Ukraine has created catastrophic consequences. Nearly 400,000 Ukrainians have fled Ukraine in response to Russia's invasion, and up to 4 million could follow. The COVID-19 pandemic is also an added challenge for communities where violence and uncertainty takes a heavy toll. All donations to the Ukraine Crisis Relief Fund will support humanitarian assistance in impacted communities in Ukraine and surrounding regions where Ukrainian refugees have fled. Global Giving's local partners are bringing relief to terrified and displaced communities, and they need resources to continue their life-saving work. Your donation to the Ukraine Crisis Relief Fund will provide shelter, food, and clean water for refugees, health and psychosocial support, access to education for kids, and economic assistance for families, and so much more. Global Giving is one of the most reliable and trustworthy charities in the world. They have a 4 out of 4 star rating and a nearly perfect score from Charity Navigator, which is a independent accreditation source. Charity Navigator gives them that high score because of their stability, efficiency, sustainability, and commitment to transparency. In addition to accreditation from the Better Business Bureau, Wise Giving Alliance, Global Giving has also made it easy, quick, and safe to support people on the ground who understand the needs in their communities better than anyone else. These organizations that are there, run by Ukrainians, were there long before the news cameras arrived, and they'll be there long after the cameras leave. They know how to make their communities more resilient to future disasters, and they're already hard at work. Global Giving puts donations and grants directly into their hands because the status quo, which gives the vast majority of funding to a few large organizations, doesn't always make sense. Global Giving relief funds have been recommended by the New York Times, the Associated Press, NPR, Washington Post, Oprah, ABC News, and the US State Department. If you want to participate in my fundraiser for Global Giving, go to bit.ly, bit.ly, and then /peace for Ukraine, or go directly to globalgiving.org. Make a donation today and help the people that are suffering in Ukraine. All right, so let's talk now about, and I hope you will donate to organizations that are helping the Ukrainians, because this invasion is really not a good thing. But anyway, we can talk about Ukrainian, Slavic folklore, Ukrainian folklore, and talk about Lisovyk and something that is such a powerful, positive force in this world. So let's talk about that. So going back to ancient times, Slavic people worshipped in groves and had deep connections, deep spiritual connections to the forest and to the trees. In fact, one of the biggest forests is in the Carpathian Mountains. It's still such a beautiful, big, untouched forest, and one of the last untouched forests in Europe, and it is such an important part of our ecosystem. However, most of us, most modern people who live in cities are really sadly removed from having the connection to the forest that our ancient ancestors had. In olden times, the forests were much bigger, populations were much smaller. There wasn't deforestation like there is today. And so people had an intimate connection to the forest, as well as having the ability to connect to the spirits of the forests. One of the most important spirits of the forests in Slavic culture is the Lisovyk. The Lisovyk is the guardian of the forest. He's there to protect people, he's there and animals, and protect the woods itself and the plants and all the creatures within the forest. He's there to guide the people and animals that connect to the forest. And he's also there to step up if anybody gets out of line. Now, some people think that the Lisovyk is just a fairy tale character, something of legend and lore. But if you are an animist and a spiritualist like me, who knows that there's more than meets the eye, you might be able to sense, hear, or even see the Lisovyk. The Lisovyk has a lot of formal titles. Sometimes we hear him referred to as the forest man, or the lord of the forest, or the master of the woods, or the kind one. It could be names like he of the pine barrens, or he of the grove, or the forester, or the forest man. Or in post-Christian times, he might be called the forest devil, because in post-Christian times, which would be after 988 AD, the old spirits sometimes got vilified. Either they were turned into saints or they were vilified, and the Lisovyk would not have been a saint. So obviously he was then turned into a something to be feared when he really isn't to be feared. In Ukrainian, he's known as the Lisovyk, or Chuchaister, or Lisun, or Polisun, or Lisovy, or Lisovypan. In Serbo-Croatian, same guy is known as the Lisak, or the Lisej, Lisnik, or Lesnik, and Lisovyk, and Lisovoy. In Bulgarian, he's known as the Lesnik. In Latvian, he's known as Mezainis. And Lithuanian, he's known as Miskinis, or Miskovelnias. In Polish, he's known as Borowy, or Lesnik, or Lesniski, or Lasovyk, or Lesy, or Gajovi. And in Belarus, he's known as the Leshy, or the Lisovyk, or the Lesun. And in Russian, he's known as the Leshy, Borovoy, Gajovoy, Leshak, Lesnik, Lisovyk, Lisovoy, or Lesun. So those are all the names. He shows up in every Slavic culture and has different variations on that same name, saying that he's the forest man. He's the forest man. The Lisovyk is the guardian of the forest. He's, as I said before, he's there to protect and guide. He's also there to step up if someone gets out of line. Lisovyk, you might want to know, what did he look like? What is this guy all about? Well, he's a giant, but he's a shapeshifter as well. So usually he would appear in a human form, or human-ish, humanoid form. Oftentimes he would be naked and hairy, or he might just be wearing a very simple white garment. He is generally seen or believed to be a giant. His skin would be rough like the bark of a tree. His eyes would be green eyes that would flash like emeralds, and his beard would be green, and his hair would be green, like moss, and like green moss hanging off of a tree. Sometimes we hear of Lisovyk carrying wooden clubs, like so that they can protect the forest. Sometimes we hear them referred to as having hairy bodies, or sometimes we hear them being referred to as having horns that curl like a ram's horn. And in these stories where we see the Lisovyk having horns like a ram, there would be a leader of the Lisovyk, and he would have golden horns. And so he was to be extra respected if you saw him in the forest. Now, like many Slavic spirits, the Lisovyk is ambiguous. He's not going to be positive or negative. He's going to respond to you and how you treat the forest and how you treat him. So if you go into the forest with respect, he's going to be a benevolent person and will protect you from danger. If you disrespect him or disrespect the forest or the creatures of the forest, he's going to cause trouble for you. He can do things like mimic the voice of one of your loved ones, calling out your name, leading you off the path in the forest and deeper into the forest. He can shift road markers or obscure paths so that you end up wandering in circles in the forests until you are delayed and frustrated. But if you're very disrespectful, he might lead you deeper and deeper into the forest until the woods would take you into itself. So, what do you do if you get into that kind of situation? Well, there's lots of lore about this. If you get tricked by a Lisovyk, then you're supposed to sit down on a nearby stump or fallen log, take off all of your clothes, and then put them back on inside out or back to front. Put your shoes on the wrong feet, and then chant this special chant: sheep's muzzle, sheep's wool. So sheep's muzzle, sheep's wool. And as you walk, if you say that with your clothes on backwards or inside out and your shoes on the wrong feet, he will no longer be able to trick you into walking into circles. Now, as I mentioned before, the Lisovyk is a powerful shapeshifter. He can grow to the height of the tallest trees, or he can shrink down to be small enough to hide behind a blade of grass. He can appear and disappear. He can transform and shapeshift into an animal, like a forest animal that you might find in the forest, like a hare or a wolf or a bear or a raven or a boar. I mean, anything that you would find in the forest, he can change that shape into that. One of his favorite things to shapeshift into, however, is the horned owl. This is his special talismanic spirit animal, I would say. The horned owl is a real favorite of his, and he may appear as one, or he may have a horned owl sitting on his shoulder. So if you're in the forest, let's say you're in the Carpathian Mountains and you're in the forest and you spot a horned owl on a tree, that is considered to be the Lisovyk guarding his forest. And if he's sitting on that tree, you shouldn't cut down that tree because that tree is special to him. Now, he can shapeshift into anything. And like I said, he can shapeshift into animals, he can grow tall, he can get small. He can also turn into a plant. So he might turn into a flaming fir tree, or he might get small like a mushroom. A particular mushroom, the mucomore, which is that red and white spotted mushroom, we sometimes refer to it as fly agaric. And it's the one used for dream journeys. And he can change into that. You know, he can change into that little red and white spotted mushroom as well. Now, the trickiest form that the Lisovyk can take is the form of a human. He could look like a poor peasant, maybe. And the only way that you can tell that he's a Lisovyk in disguise is that he'll have some small detail out of place. Something will be just a little bit off. For example, he might have his shoes on the wrong feet or his clothing inside out and backward. Now, I'm wondering if you're walking away from a Lisovyk and you change into the wrong shoes and you put your clothes inside out or backwards, is someone else going to think you're the Lisovyk? That always has crossed my mind. But anyway, this is how you can tell if he's got the shoes on the wrong feet, his clothing is inside out or backwards, or maybe that's why he leaves you alone. He thinks you're another Lisovyk. You might see missing buttons on his clothes. He might not be wearing his belt, his kreka, his sash, or there might be other obvious signs like in his body. He might be missing an eyebrow or missing an ear, or he might have like a mole or a wart on his face that moves from place to place. There might be mystical signs that tip you off. It might be his footprints. If he's stepping on something dusty or dirty and his footprints are swept away by the wind the moment he lifts his foot, that's a sure sign that you're in the presence of a Lisovyk. Or if he's standing in the sunlight and you don't see him casting a shadow, there's another good sign that he is a spirit being and not what he presents to be. Now, so there's so many ways that you can see him. Where does he live? What does he do? Why is he out in the forest? Well, Lisovyki are generally solitary spirits. So they're not hanging around in groups. You're not going to come into contact with a group of them. Usually we consider them to be living in the forest with lots of space to roam around. Now there is more than one, but the next guy is going to live far away. He's going to live in the forest down the road. And then maybe down the road, even further, you might find a different one. They're pretty territorial and they roam in the woods alone, and they're pretty solitary spirits. Now, that doesn't mean they don't come in contact with one another. They might have a dispute over territory. But instead of invading a country or starting a war, what do? They play a game of cards. That's a great solution. So they play a game of cards, and the losing Lisovyk must send his squirrels and his hares over to the winner's forest. I think that's a good resolution to conflict right there. So that's how they solve it. Now, in a minute, I'm going to tell you ways that you can connect to the Lisovyk. But if you want to know more about Slavic magic, you definitely need to check out my Witchcraft workshop series. On the first Sunday of every month, I hold a magical workshop over Zoom. And starting in April, these once-a-month workshops will be focused on Slavic magic. April 3rd, I'm going to be teaching about Pesanki, which is talismanic Slavic egg magic. In May, I'll be teaching about Motanki, which are Slavic spirit dolls. In June, Vinoki, which are Slavic flower crowns. August 7th, I'll be teaching about Vyshyvanki, which is talismanic embroidery. I'm wearing my Vyshyvanka right now. September 4th, I'll be teaching about Vilivari Visk, which is the Slavic wax pouring ritual. October 2nd, I'll be teaching about Veretino, which is spinning magic. And November, I'll be teaching about Živivon, which is Slavic living fire magic. And in December, I'll be teaching about Slavic winter holiday rituals, and particularly the Diduch, which is the wheat talisman made for the ancestors during the winter holidays. So if you'd like to join me for some hands-on Slavic magic, sign up for these workshops today. You'll find them by going to parlorofwonders.com, then go to learn, then go to workshops, or you can simply go to witchcraftworkshops.com and it will take you directly there. So let's go into how to meet the Lisovyk. So as I mentioned, Lisovyki are beautiful forest spirits, and to encounter them, you will naturally have to spend some time among trees. So the first step to meeting one is to find a natural tree-filled area. The wilder this space is, the better. Spend some time in there. If you can, camp and stay day and night in the forest for a few days. And if you do that, you're more likely to enhance your senses and be able to spot the Lisovyk. And he's more likely to trust you enough to be seen by him. So that's something that you might want to consider doing, is going camping in the forest. Now, if you are not interested in camping and all you're interested in doing is just passing through a woods without being led off the path or disrespecting him, and for that, all you really need to do is respect the forest and leave an offering for the forest and leave him an offering. However, you might want to meet a Lisovyk and befriend him. You know, in traditional Ukrainian legend and lore, hunters and shepherds who were very intimately connected to the woods, having to go into the woods to hunt or having to go through the woods with their sheep or their cows or whatever, and they have to possibly encounter him. Well, they were known to really cultivate a relationship with him because they could get a great boon from befriending a Lisovyk. They could have a successful hunt. The Lisovyk would help protect and tend to their flocks, or they might even learn some secrets of magic from him. So if you respect him, if you respect the Lord of the Wood, it may not only be safe for you as you travel, but you may gain some powerful wisdom as well. So first thing to do is show your respect for his home. That means behave when you go into the woods, behave as if you are a polite guest. Don't swear, don't make excessive noise, don't be like a party animal, leaving trash and disturbing the creatures of the forest or damaging things or just being bratty. You're going into someone else's home. That's what you have to think of. Even if you're thinking about, cutting down a tree or even breaking off a branch, maybe you're getting some wood for a fire or something like that, you would definitely want to leave an offering for the Lisovyk or ask him for permission to cut down the tree or break off the branch. And you would never, never, never want to harm an old spruce tree, as this is his special tree, and that's where the spirit of the Lisovyk resides. Now, to begin to establish that relationship, the first thing that you can do is to feed the trees, to make offerings to the trees. That's a great way to get started. So you can leave, for example, scrambled eggs at the base of a tree, or break a raw egg against a tree trunk, or pour compote, which is juice made from boiled dried fruit or beer, at the roots of a tree. So you can pour juice, beer, leave an egg, break an egg, leave some scrambled eggs. All of those are great offerings for the tree. And if you leave that offering for the tree, you're already setting up a good relationship, potential relationship with the Lisovyk. Now, once you've shown respect for his home and made an offering to a tree, now you're ready to make a direct offering to him. So for that, you can leave a gift of food at a forest crossroads. If you find a tree stump or a fallen log or high up in the branches of a tree, you can leave your offering there. Great offerings for the Lisovyk would be things like homemade bread with a little bit of salt, kasha, which is Ukrainian for porridge, nalesniki, which are Ukrainian crepes, salo, which is pork belly, or krushanki, which are hard-boiled eggs that are dyed red. So you can leave these pieces of food for him as an offering and then come back a day or two later. If your offering is gone, it means that the Lisovyk has received it and that you have established a positive relationship with him, and that you are safe to do your work or travel through the woods. If your offering is untouched, wait a few more days and then check again. And if it's still there on your third visit, then that's a sign that you need to make a different offering at a new place in the forest and try again. So you got to keep trying before and get that good relationship before you start doing your work in the forest or traveling through the forest. Now, if you'd like to encounter the Lisovyk, that's just to be able to move through the forest and not be bothered and show him your respect. But maybe you want to actually encounter him or have an experience with him or learn from him. And if you want to do that, you need to meet with him, and you need to do that. You need to gain his trust. Now, it may take some time before he feels he can share secrets with you, but if you follow these guidelines, you might be able to open that door to that magical knowledge. So knowing that the Lisovyk can sometimes be shy, so you would have to go in, of course, very respectfully, leave your offerings first, and know that you might see some signs before you actually see him. So one of the signs that you might see are magpies. Magpies are considered the Lisovyk's special messengers, and they warn him anytime anyone is in the forest, a stranger is in the forest. So if you hear a magpie giving its call, which is like a little harsh rattling sound, that's the magpie letting him know that you are nearby, which means that he is nearby. So if you hear a magpie, you can call out to the Lisovyk and ask him to come out. Now, there's a special way to do that, a special technique that draws the Lisovyk out. It's very silly and very funny, but it's actually the way to call him. So what you do is you bend over and you look between your legs and you call out, "I walked, I found, I lost." This phrase is irresistible to Lisovyk. And if one is nearby, he will appear from behind a tree just for a blink and say, "You figured it out." And then he'll disappear. That little encounter is very quick and very fast, but it will allow the Lisovyk to see you and you to see the Lisovyk. Well, that's a great big step in being able to establish this relationship with him. So when that happens, leave an offering for him nearby. One of the things we talked about, the porridge or the bread and the salt and so on, or the eggs or whatever. And he'll know that you are respecting him, that you're trustworthy, and that you want to have that friendship with him. Then go back again for another visit, another day, to the same place where you saw him before. And once again, bend over, look between your legs, but this time you say, "Lisovyk, Lord of the forest, come to me now, not as a gray wolf, not as a black raven, not as a flaming fir tree, but as a man." If the Lisovyk is nearby, he will emerge in his true form. Now, he may just come pop out again. So if you want him to stay and you want to talk with him, you have to get him to laugh. I mean, that may be why, looking through your legs, right? And if you can get him to laugh, he might stay and speak with you. Offer him some of your food or some tobacco and use your best manners. Unless he introduces himself to you and shares his name, you call him by his honorific. You call him Lord of the Forest, Master of the Woods, the Kind One. You call him by those honorable names, right? If things go well for you with the Lisovyk, he might play his flute for you, and his flute imitates the sounds of the birds of their forest and their beautiful music. He might also ask you to dance, and if he does, don't say no. His dancing transforms him into a whirlwind. And if you dance with him, you'll have an amazing dance. But if you don't, the whirlwind will knock you over. So you always want to say yes to a dance with the Lisovyk. If you dance with him well, he might even reward you with gifts and blessings for dancing with him. When he's ready to share his wisdom with you, he may teach you the secret languages of the animals so that you can speak to and understand them. These secret calls will, those calls that you can learn from him can also allow you to take spirit journeys, and you can communicate with ancestors and animal spirits. He may share with you the secrets of the mukomor, that fly agaric mushroom, and how to use it in rites and rituals. He might share with you something else. So whatever knowledge he shares with you, it's going to be valuable information and will elevate your magical practice. So try spending some time with the trees. Loving the trees is a great way. Even if you're in the city, showing some love to trees will be a great way to honor the Lisovyk, and will bring you in some small way into that forest world. If you can go out into the forest, go out into the forest and get in touch with the Lisovyk and get to know his home. Be a respectful guest, come with love, come with an offering. Notice the trees around you. Spend time outside in nature and touch trees and make offerings with loving kindness. As we know, each tree has a unique consciousness and personality. And if you make a habit of communicating and connecting with trees, you not only open the door to the magical world of the trees, you might even open the door to the magical world of the Lisovyk. Well, there you go. That about does it for this episode of Baba Yaga's Magic. If you would like to get even more info about Slavic magic, then check out the Learn page over at parlorofwonders.com, where you will find a ton of resources, including workshops, blog articles, past podcast episodes, and the way to join me live over Zoom for the live magic Q&A tea party, which takes place every Sunday at 5 p.m. Pacific, 6 p.m. Mountain, 7 p.m. Central, and 8 p.m. Eastern. Just go to parlorofwonders.com and click on the Learn tab to see all the goodies there. And if you want to join me for the live magic Q&A, go to spellsquad.com and sign up. So there you go. Thank you to all the Spell Squad members out there who have subscribed to and shared this podcast with your friends. And thank you to the fabulous folks who have left reviews on iTunes and Stitcher. Those reviews really help to get the word out to the wider world about the podcast, and I appreciate you taking the time to do them. Thank you to Gilles Navarre for production and engineering, and thank you to you for joining me. I'm looking forward to the next episode when we'll be learning about Ukrainian egg magic. Until next time, this is Madame Pamita and Baba Yaga saying Zamahiyu to magic, and may all your stories have the happiest fairy tale endings.